Yes, welcome to the fine print, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with another great guest today. It's been a minute since I've had a guest on the show. I've been spacing them out a little more here. Let's do our homework off the top. A lot of you guys watched me deal with this nonsense with the comedy club the other day. Hopefully that's all behind us now. That was some nonsense I just didn't need in my life. Nate Brown from Green Mountain Gardens here in Vermont's got a mixed tier 1 cultivation license. Great talk with Nate there. I really like what Nate's up to. My man Mav Star, who just put out his new album, Verona. John Campbell from Satori, definitely one of my most watched interviews there. It was a good one. And my man Evan Carlson from NEK Broadband, bringing internet access to rural Vermonters. And let's see what we got coming up here. I got let's see, September 3rd. I got an old friend of mine, Micah Khan, who just directed a movie called Zombie Wedding. I've never done an interview with like a movie guy, so this is going to be super cool. We're going to talk about making movies. Then September 10th, this is going to be a big one. I got Malcolm McKinnon, who was a writer and editor and photographer for High Times for 25 years. I'm very excited to have Malcolm on the show. I hope I don't fuck that one up. And then on the 17th, I got Ian Oswalt, who's doing some fascinating science, digging in a little deeper than even the terpene stuff and going into different chemical compounds in the plant, which he's going to have to explain because I'm not a chemist. Yeah, that's about all the homework we got. My guest today is a guy that I picked up online and I started following and really was enjoying some of his commentary. Reached out. Thought we might have some ideas that were like in line and invited him on the show. He's got let's just slap his logo up there. Wham. The company's called Jade Nectar out in California. They specialize in making tinctures. And please welcome to the show, Jeff Nordahl. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for being here today, Jeff.
Oh, thanks for having me. And very cool to be connecting with other cannabis appreciators and stoners from other parts of the planet. Yeah, it's cool. It's actually a whole global community of stoners. And thanks to the internet, we're now connecting with people in Thailand and Pakistan, Afghanistan, and other areas. I put in Sumatra. Actually, we grew some plants from Sumatra, and all of a sudden, all these people from Sumatra were like contacting, like, "Yeah, you're growing our weed." So
cool. Anyway, so Jeff, before we do anything serious, and I'm going to solo on you for a minute, would you give us a 5-minute life story, please?
Sure, I'll do my best. I'm a rambler though, so anyway, here we go. And pardon my glasses. I'm old. I have to wear glasses now. But so I've always been a cannabis appreciator ever since like early days of high school, and then got into psychedelics. And then, long story short, I was kind of a punk rock, metal, thrash metal head all through high school and was in punk rock bands. But then I went to a Grateful Dead concert in 1991, and that completely blew my mind. So then went to a lot of Grateful Dead concerts in the 90s, and just that whole culture of just counterculture, outside commercialism. A lot of people are probably very familiar with the Grateful Dead, but they let you tape their shows. The ticket prices were actually, quite reasonable for the amount of entertainment they delivered. And it was all sort of fueled by cannabis and psychedelics and that quest into the mystical unknown. So I've always been in that headspace. But then fast forward a while, did a whole bunch of things. And then I never went to college or anything, but I taught myself how to computer program. I taught myself a bunch of things, but anyway, in about 15 years ago, I ended up getting really sick, and it was one of these mystery illnesses kind of autoimmune things. I also became like allergic to all kinds of stuff and had lethargic. And what ended up happening was it turns out I had Lyme disease. And I know you guys on the East Coast are very familiar with Lyme disease, but we actually have a pretty strong presence, high risk Lyme disease situation in California as well, especially in Northern California. So it turns out that's what was going on. But by the time we figured it out, I was already in the chronic Lyme stage. And so I was pretty sick, and I tried a bunch of treatments. But what ended up happening was my doctor, who was a hippy dippy doctor, he was actually Jerry Garcia's doctor for a short while. He recommended really working with cannabis for symptom relief. And sure enough, cannabis really did help with my symptoms. But then, and this was right around 2010, 2011. And that's right when in Santa Cruz, where our laws started changing, where it was really clearly safe to actually grow your own cannabis medicine for yourself. So I ended up I've always loved farming. I've always loved, fruit trees and growing tomatoes and everything. So I was like, shit, yeah, I'm going to grow my own cannabis, my own medicine. And so I started growing. My first year, I grew like 10 plants, and I'd grown cannabis a long time ago, but I was just really nomadic. So I never really got to sit down and farm because I was always on the move and traveling. But yeah, so this was the first time I could really do a full season grow. And it was just such a beautiful process. And while I was growing those plants, while I was leafing them, I started eating the leaves. Instead of throwing them on the ground, I was like, I'll just eat the leaves. And I actually liked that strong plant medicine flavor. But then I started noticing that it really actually relieved my symptoms. So then I was like, oh, I better check and make sure I'm not like poisoning myself. So I went online, and then I found out there was this doctor, Dr. Courtney in Northern California, who was recommending juicing cannabis. And no, it doesn't like kill you. I was scared maybe I'm damaging my kidneys or something eating these leaves, but it turns out he was promoting it for health and also for all these weird autoimmune issues that conventional medicine doesn't really address. So then I just started eating leaves, and then I started juicing it, and then I started freezing my own cannabis juice. And so for a year straight, every day I just drank and consumed raw cannabis leaves. And I kid you not, I can't prove it scientifically, but it's what, so I can't say cannabis juice cures Lyme disease. I wouldn't say that. I was doing a bunch of other herbal remedies as well, and detoxing and saunas and all sorts of cleansing stuff. But then the cannabis, the raw cannabis, especially the THCA, CBDA, and whatever is in the leaves, all those compounds, it didn't just relieve symptoms. After a year, I feel like it cured me. And I think so the antimicrobial properties, and Lyme kind of hangs out in your gut. So I think just having that going through my system just ended up, all I can say is I can now work 7 days a week, 12, 16 hours a day. I've got tons of energy. I can think clearly. I'm still sensitive to chemical smells, but that's all right. That's fine. So I think it cured me. So once I had that experience, I was like, oh my God, this plant's amazing. I knew people had talked about it as medicine, but I kind of always thought that it was actually, just stoners trying to justify being stoners because cannabis cured a lab rat, of cancer. But then I was like, I had my firsthand experience with cannabis medicine. So I just started sharing it with other people. I knew some people with Parkinson's, MS, chronic back pain, migraines, and I just started sharing it with people like, hey, you got to check this out. It might help. and just everyone was having these positive experiences. So I was like, man, there's really something magical. How do people not know about this plant medicine? And so I started a medical collective that we met at our local Grange Hall, the Live Oak Grange. I got permission at the county to do this, and we just started meeting with medical patients. And a lot of them are like little church ladies who have fibromyalgia, or people, or a wife comes in, her husband has Parkinson's, so she, bring stuff back, and we were just giving away for free frozen cannabis juice cubes, and then our tinctures, our olive oil tinctures, both decarb and raw, acidic THCA, CBDA, and yeah, it was beautiful. We just and started connecting all these dots, like which formulas work for different people and different conditions. And of course, it was all anecdotal, but that's where clinical starts. You start with anecdotal. So anyway, we had all that going. The Prop 64 came along, which basically destroyed the medical collective model.
Wait, let's pause it there, because that was a good 5-minute life story. I want
All
to do one other thing first, and for the rest of this, I'm going to put you over here in the big box. And we got AJ here. Super happy to have found this channel. Thanks, Jade, Nectar, Free the V, California Bud Tenders, and customers love Jade and what they do. Thanks for tuning in.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you.
So, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
You got something?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. So I've been in, I'm not trying to virtue signal, or, everybody's always like, oh, I've given away more weed than I've sold, and I'm in it for the plant. So I'm sensitive to that sort of virtue signaling stuff. But I have just found that cannabis, yes, it's an industry. We sell it, we make money, we pay our bills with it. But at its core, it really is a movement. And it was at least in modern times, like the last 30 years, 30, 40 years, it's really been a medical patient right to medicine issue that's propelled and won us all these freedoms. So just at its core, I still very much deeply believe in the medicine. And it's one of these things, I'm going to give a kind of a weird analogy, but let's say like a hurricane comes and destroys Louisiana, like some town in Louisiana. There's some human beings who may see all these people in need who need water, and they'll drive to Costco and go buy like 100 cases of water and go to those areas that were devastated, and they'll just give the water away free. Like, hey, we're here to help you. We saw you're going through some tough times, so we're just going to give you water, to be good human beings and help fellow humans. And there's other people who may be like, oh, those people are really fucked right now and they need water. I'm going to go buy some water at Costco and I'm going to sell it for $10 a bottle as a, opportunistic way to hustle to make money. So those are just two very different attitudes of sort of supply and demand, and seeing, an opportunity to just help others in need or make money off people in need. And I'm myself, and again, I'm not trying to virtue signal here, just the magic that I see is connecting people in need in a positive way with cannabis, and just see it over and over. And a lot of time I can tell you, man, like some of these old time people, like old churchy people and such, for them, the concept of consuming cannabis is almost like, sorry if this is a bad example, but for some men, it's almost like cheating on their wife and going and being with a prostitute or something. It's like they feel dirty and that they're being a bad person. But once their family is like, Dad, you have Parkinson's, fucking take this, just try it. And the whole family supports them. And then all of a sudden they take it and they're like, oh my God, I actually slept through the night. I actually am experiencing some relief. And so seeing also that complete turnaround and perspective on cannabis when they've been told, for decades that it's a sin or only thing that deviants.
Drug.
Yeah, it's a drug, and you're like corroding society if you touch cannabis. And then all of a sudden, so it's like the devil's lettuce all of a sudden becomes this angelic savior plant that they realize, oh, it's just a plant. It produces these compounds. And for a lot of people, it can be very helpful and actually be a savior. And it may be the only thing that really provides relief. And it's just really magical to see that perspective shift. And we just need more of that because there's so many people who could be benefiting from cannabis right now, especially people 50 years old or older. Seniors are probably the people who could really benefit the most. But they've been, I don't want to say brainwashed, but yeah, they've been
Kind of.
The propaganda has been effective, and so they are very skeptical of trying cannabis. But we'd like to see that all changed, and we just like people to feel better, and if cannabis can help them get relief, let's do it. And once people try it, most people, as long as they don't eat some shitty THC edibles and eat way too much and have like a really bad, that's another thing. You want to make sure their first time that they're taking like CBD or a mellow dose so they don't get traumatized. But as long as they don't overdo it and get freaked out, it's usually a very positive experience. So anyway.
Cool. Yeah, Jeff. So let's talk. I do want to talk about Prop 64, but I think it would make more sense if you tell us about your farm first and the license that you're holding out there in California, because we talked about this a lot on the phone. There's these micro business licenses. Maybe you could explain that to us and what it takes to get one of those and everything that comes with it.
Yeah. Okay. So the micro business license is probably the most misunderstood license in California. I don't know how it's being presented in other states, but in California was unique because we already had so many small farmers and legacy farmers already, and we had a whole Prop 215 infrastructure going. So we had it wasn't necessarily like Illinois or someplace that might have had some people growing, in their basement or garage. But in California, we had tons of small farmers, like whole communities, especially up north, where the whole economy was based on sort of cannabis farming. So there was no way in California to get buy-in to pass our legalization, like whatever you call voter initiative, or what ended up being Prop 64, because they tried the year before. I forget what the name of it was, but it was too corporate and it didn't pass. So they needed to at least sound like it was going to be small farmer friendly. So written into Prop 64, if you read the original wording of Prop 64 and do a word search for micro business license, you will find it throughout the entire document. It's constantly speaking about the micro business license. And in Prop 64, and I can explain this as well, how there was a little switcheroo when it became regulations. But anyway, in Prop 64, it was defined as a small cultivation license. So it was defined as, but at its core, it was a cultivation license. So it was 10,000 square feet of canopy, which is just under a quarter acre. So it's very modest, but if you know how to grow, you can pump out some pretty good yield on 10,000 square feet. And but then on top of that, it was sort of like a small winery or a craft brewer or such. it enabled the small farmer to be able to also do in-house to vertically integrate. So you could do your own manufacturing, level 1 manufacturing, meaning no volatile, but you could do like edibles and tinctures and things that are not using explosive solvents.
Like bubble hash and shit like that.
Yeah, bubble hash, rosin. I do olive oil infusion, which is we just soak whole cannabis flowers in olive oil. So as long as you're not using butane, propane, actually you can even use ethanol. You can even use alcohol. That's still level 1. So anyway, that's the manufacturing. Then you can, so there's a list of activities that you can do all under one license. So then there's also distribution. And distribution, first of all, is yes, that means you can transport your products that you create and actually transport that to a dispensary. So you don't have to use a third-party distributor, which really is like what throws the sand in the gears right now in California, where farmers are beholden to these third-party distributors. And not saying they're evil, and they're necessary, and a lot of them provide a service for, especially for long distances away from where the farmer is located. But right now, because they're required,
Right.
that's a whole nother power dynamic.
That's weird. Like, we don't have in Vermont. We have wholesale companies if you want to use them, and they can do transportation shit for you, but it's not required.
Yeah, if it were just a convenience where they were providing a service that made things more efficient and your life easier and extend your reach, then cool. Then the burden would be on the distributor to provide service. But right now they're in a position where we're required. You need us, motherfuckers. So they're not really in that same like, let's provide the best possible service. They're like, you don't have a choice. You have to use one of us. So anyway, enough of that. I'm not trying to dump on distributors. I work with some.
Oh, but I think that's an important. I think that's an important point. Sorry to cut you off, but I think it's important to know that that is required in California as opposed to Vermont, where it's optional.
And you guys, if you have that optional, that is such an advantage. Now, I want to make sure, getting back to the micro business. So with the micro biz, though, you can do your own self distribution under that micro biz. And what's even more important, and this doesn't really make much sense, and why this got set up this way has to do with the unions and the Teamsters, and the Teamsters wanted to control distribution, and that was part of the negotiation of Prop 64. So they wanted a 3-tiered, just like the alcohol system, where there's a transportation and distribution section, and the Teamsters were like, hey, if we're going to support this concept politically, we want something in return. So I'm not dumping on the Teamsters either, but what they were thinking they were getting into was that there were going to be semi-truck loads of Emerald Triangle weed being driven daily down to LA, and they wanted to unionize all that transportation. They thought so. That was kind of their buy-in and what they were going to get out of the whole deal. So I'm not saying it's evil. It's just interesting to know why this third-party distributor system was even created, because it clearly is massively inefficient and just throws a monkey wrench in the whole supply chain. But anyway, getting back to micro business. So with self-distribution, you can do your own distro directly to from your farm to your retailers. But even more importantly, the burden and the responsibility of doing the lab testing. So meaning, for me, I make my tinctures, right? Before I can take that batch of tinctures to a retail space, I have to get it lab tested through a third-party laboratory to make sure it's safe and that the cannabinoids are the right count and everything. So in the distribution activity, the distributors are the only ones who can do the lab testing, where the lab comes to your facility, picks up the samples. So the lab drives to your facility, picks up the samples, then drives away and takes them back to the lab. Then I have to put, as the distributor, I have to put that batch in quarantine until the lab approves and releases what's called a COA. I think it's certificate of authority. I think that's what, anyway,
Analysis.
COA. And then once it passes, then the distributor can then put the final like cannabinoid counts and stickers on the product. So that's a really important thing that doesn't, for distribution, it sounds like you're moving and transporting product and that's all you're doing, but it's an actual vital choke point in the whole supply chain, is who actually does that lab test, like lab test sampling and then quarantining and then putting the final packaging stickers on based on the lab results. So that's
and random shout out to my man Josh Sweeter at Infinite Chemical Analysis Labs, who just sued like 14 testing labs out there. Random side note there, Jeff.
Oh, and by the way, dude, there's so much shenanigans going on in California with if you, I'll just say, I used to, as a distributor, because people knew on some, phone call solicitation that I was distributor, so I needed to work with labs. I would get sales calls from labs who would say, oh, we test the highest for THC and we have the highest pass rate, which
Really?
means we'll boost your THC to whatever you want it. And if you got dirty shit, we'll pass it too. That was their like sales pitch. And I was like, click. So, and I myself, because I make wellness products and a lot of our stuff goes to very fragile people. If there's a problem, I want to know there's something wrong with our batch. So that's a whole nother, we're not slinging vape pens and gummies and crap. You know what I mean? Anyway, sorry.
What's funny, Jeff, is that Josh told me something in the opposite direction. He said he had big cannabis like executives coming into the lab and being like, hey, we want to use your lab, but only if everything tests like over 27%, like, or something. Well, it's wild.
The labs get worked, and I can't really dive into this too much, but
as a side note, yeah,
I've talked to people who worked at labs. I'm not going to say which labs. It's not a lab I work with, but yeah, they actually had part of their SOP, like their standard operating procedures, was for certain clients, do not fail it. So if they got a hit on pesticide, they then were supposed to call the manager and they were supposed to figure out how to. So anyway, if you have questions about that, you can look at the LA Times piece on the pesticide.
Yeah, also Beard Brothers, I think, just did a piece with Josh Sweeter there about all the pesticides and very related stuff there. I want to keep it moving here.
It's crazy. Jeff. All right. So anyway,
we touched on, back to the micro license. I think we were up to the retail maybe.
Now the final activity. Oh, and by the way, there's another little perk in the California microbiz. You're also allowed to distribute seeds, which usually that's only reserved for a nursery license. But another little perk for the microbiz cultivation is you can distribute seeds, which is totally awesome. So then the final activity, if you can get it, is you're also allowed to do retail. And retail means a brick and mortar physical shop. But that's really challenging for a farm because farms usually aren't zoned for retail. But you can also do, if you're county, now this is where it gets into county and city jurisdiction, regulation, planning department stuff. But you could technically do non-storefront retail, which means delivery service. And that would be, right now, that would be like a pizza delivery service, where someone places an order, and then you would drive the product to their home for delivery. So that is an option with the California micro business license. Right now in Santa Cruz, where I'm at, there's a moratorium on retail license, no more retail license. So I couldn't even get delivery service if I could.
Why is that? Is it overcrowded or
oversaturation? They just we have already in Santa Cruz, I think we have one of the highest densities of retail shops in per capita. And then we also had outside delivery services trying to penetrate into Santa Cruz. So then there was protectionism going on. They're trying to pass laws to ban outside. So there's a lot of protectionism for our own retailers, and which, whatever, it's kind of, but we're also working on a new ordinance that may change everything and be actually a lot of fun, is that farms who are set up to host, like have the infrastructure to have guests, we're hoping we'll be able to get this passed at the local level where farms will actually be able to do on-site consumption and on-site retail. So all of a sudden then we're turning, instead of just a commodity, we're now turning into an experience. Yeah. And Santa Cruz is a big sort of tourist town. That's our powerhouse, and people come to Santa Cruz to get weird. We're known as like a weirdo, hippie kind of counterculture town. So people come here to do something a little different from their, maybe more mundane wherever they're from. So yeah, it's totally in line that they would want to come to a cannabis farm, consume. And what we really want to do is have like a wellness retreat center where we can, people can do things for fun, but then also on some days do like actual deep plant medicine wellness stuff.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, there's a lot of other plants out there besides cannabis. Cannabis is the coolest all around plant. It's so versatile, but for specialized situations, there are other plants and funguses and things that have very magical power. So we would like to be a sanctuary for all of that activity.
I'd like to hang out at a place like that.
In the Redwoods, in Santa Cruz. I mean, the first acid test ever, like the Grateful Dead acid test, took place actually like 5 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now. So we kind of have this whole psychedelic vortex and lore going on here. But in Vermont, you guys are a bunch of hippies and counterculture folks in Vermont, yeah?
Accurate.
Cool.
Although increasingly we're getting more people from out of state moving here. It's changing the vibe a little bit, but that will happen. I want to slap your logo up here. Jeff Nordahl, Jade, Nectar. Let me ask you, Jeff, how many dispensaries are there in Santa Cruz?
That's a good question. Okay, I'm just going to rattle them off. Creekside, Curbstone, Santa Cruz, Three Bros, Flavors, Treehouse, Santa Cruz Naturals, Kind Peoples, whatever the one is in Capitola, Soquel, 12, and I think there's like maybe 2 others. So there's like, oh no, and then there's more within the municipality. So there's Santa Cruz County, but then within Santa Cruz County, we have the city of Watsonville, city of Cap.
Yeah.
So
how many people is in this area?
That's a good question. I'll just,
we got Burlington here in Vermont. I'm just curious because Burlington is our only real city. And maybe when the colleges, when UVM is in session, there's maybe 50,000 people there. And we've got 15 dispensaries in Burlington right now.
Oh, okay. Wow. You guys probably have a higher density than we do.
There's 3 if you go down Church Street, there's 3 almost right in a row. 3 out of 4 doors is a dispensary. So they're really packing them in, man. And I'm wondering like where the saturation point is, honestly.
Well, and that is something to consider. You have like free market. But then what happens if all of a sudden the entire town is just all dispensaries? And it's, and it's like, it changes. And, we love cannabis, but, you got to remember you're in a community of other people who may not be as enthusiastic as about cannabis and such like that. So there's a balance. But I just looked, Santa Cruz County, it looks like 265,000 people. And I'd say we probably total have about 20 dispensaries.
So Burlington might be even more saturated. And you said your town is pretty saturated.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tough to follow all this, but I think in Oklahoma, I think they did a free for all where it was unlimited. And but what ended up happening, is I don't know if maybe someone knows more on this, but from what I just sort of heard is they just popped up everywhere, but then it was oversaturated, so a lot of them went out. And everyone's got different vibes and such. You've gone to a dispensary. Some feel really positive, and sometimes they feel kind of almost like some shady kind of vibe going on. So you just want to be respectful of the entire community and not.
Well, and we're starting to see, the reason I asked is because we're starting to see this here. It was a minute ago, but they started. All right, we had 5 tiers of grow licenses. So I think they took away the tier 4 and tier 5s, and they started like limiting the licensing. So I'm wondering if maybe what we're seeing in California is in our future here in Vermont. And, as soon as we catch up to you guys, which is usually about 10 years.
Yeah, hard to know. But the weird thing is because Colorado and Oregon and Washington came before California. So it's kind of weird. For some reason here in California, we thought we would be the exception to what was going on in Colorado and Oregon and Washington. And they had the same surpluses. And then all of a sudden, farmers had 1,000 pounds of killer weed just sitting in their storage that they couldn't even get rid of because everyone had overgrown. We had mass surpluses. So if someone wanting to get into cannabis, like in a new state that's just coming online, it would highly recommend going and touring some other states to get a little preview of what you're getting into. Because I've seen it. I mean, it can work, and people who really have a deep connection with the plant and such like that, it's definitely encourage folks to do it. But for folks who are more thinking this is going to be like the next crypto thing, and they're just kind of getting into it for, more for the fast money hustle and then cash out.
It's a silly plan.
It's not working. Yeah, it's not working out for a lot of folks who just, and a lot of times I've seen these business models, and here's their business model: grow shit tons of weed. That's it. And you really, and again, I don't want to give unsolicited advice, but for folks who are interested in this as far as sustainable and really want to have some longevity in cannabis, is one, if you're not trying to build an empire and on a Ferrari quest, but you just want to live like the homesteader, craft cannabis, small farmer lifestyle, the micro business license is the absolute best license you can get. The problem is it's available at the state, but the disconnect now is that in some counties and municipalities, they're making it very challenging to actually get the micro business itself because they're considering distribution and retail and some of these things. They're considering those as commercial activities, even though for distribution, just having a bag of weed and the lab guy puts his hand in it, puts it in a sack and drives away, is that really a commercial activity that require that on the same level as airplane manufacturing? You know, it's just and someone's just showing up here real quick. I'm on a live stream right now.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
So, but here's where there's hope and where things, so you can either get really lucky, and if your farm kind of already has a paved road and has an accessory building and can kind of pass some of these sort of commercial fire requirements and such, cool. But what really needs to happen, and in the county of Mendocino right now, which is a big Emerald Triangle cannabis zone, Mendocino actually has what's called a home occupation or cottage micro business license. So if you're a small family farm, if you live on your farms and you have a permitted house, and then you have a permitted accessory structure like a garage or even a shack or shed, and you don't have outside employees, I think you're maybe allowed 1 or 2 outside employees. But then that falls into a cottage home occupation business, just like a daycare facility or hair salon that you're doing out of your house, or baking cookies or making jam. Mendocino is the only one that I know of right now who has also applied that to cannabis. And what that does is that then waives the need for all the commercial fire upgrades, which a lot of times can mean a 20-foot wide paved road, 80,000 gallons of water storage. But then it also avoids all the ADA, American Disabilities Act upgrades. Now, everybody, of course, wants to be sensitive and supports ADA issues. But if your farm needs to spend $200,000 to build, you know, all this infrastructure and all the wheelchair ramps when it's just your family working on that farm, obviously that would kill the project for the farmer if they have to do all this ADA upgrade when they don't even have outside employees.
Well, and didn't you also say it would have cost you like $1 million to make your driveway 20 feet wide up to code or something like that?
Yeah. So my place, luckily, and by the way, what's really important too, and sorry, and again, I'm not trying to be like Uncle Jeff here giving people advice and stuff.
Oh, Uncle Jeff, go.
Do their own thing. But if you're thinking about getting into this, you really have to build bridges and try and build relationships with county planning department people. And I'm not saying go pay them off or anything dirty, not at all. You just have to get on their good side, demonstrate that you're professional, volunteer to help with certain things. Because when that fire inspector shows up at your property, there's 2 different lenses they can be looking through. They can be looking through like, you criminal friggin' hippie who, you know, probably burned down the neighborhood a long time ago with your stupid janky indoor grow. And they can look at you through that lens, trying to find every reason to say no to your project. And if they want to say no, they'll find ways to say no.
Mm-hmm.
But if you demonstrate, you know, like try and work with them on defensible fire space and get involved just somehow with the fire department and know who's going to be checking your stuff out, then when they come out, they're looking through a lens of how can we make this work? How can we find solutions? And for my property, I had a nice paved driveway coming up to my property, but it wasn't 20 feet wide. But I also had a dirt road that went through a neighbor's property that then hit pavement. So we could do that as a fire escape. So if there was a fire, when the fire trucks are coming up, they don't want to crash into cars fleeing. So we just have part of our fire escape plan is we'll go through that alternate escape route while the fire trucks come in. And that's totally legit for neighborhoods and everything. They do it all the time. But but you just have to make that case for yourself. But if you're just going to be
a dick,
someone who doesn't, or just has a bad attitude towards any of the authority and such like that, you got to remember they're humans too. So if you're not being a team player with them, they may find, and everyone's overworked, and if they can get you off their desk, your file off their desk, they'll
well, and you said you had a bunch of these people up to your house. You even had some cops up there, huh? That must be kind of interesting, having cops up to inspect your weed farm.
It was weird. So this goes back to 2016, 17, when Prop 64 first passed. Hey. Then our county started trying to figure out how on earth they were going to do this license thing. And that's a whole complicated story. And they did not make it easy. There was a lot of shenanigans. But I took a leap of faith. And just a few years before this, I had gotten raided. So I've been sitting there, even though I had all my medical paperwork, everything. I've experienced that with 15 cops on your property, going through your couch cushions and everything. It's not fun. They didn't end up, I wasn't doing anything wrong. So no, I didn't get no charges pressed. They didn't take me to the station or anything. That's a long story, but they're basically looking for money and guns. Let's be honest. That's kind of what happened back then. But I took the leap of faith, and I just said, I want to be a team player. I want to see cannabis be a positive thing. I believe in cannabis. So I'm going to take that leap of faith and try and help to be an ambassador for cannabis with these very skeptical county officials who kind of don't really like cannabis people, because we had a lot of green rushers who showed up in Santa Cruz who trashed the place too. So they had some reasons to not appreciate growers, and all the cultivators kind of got painted with that same brush, as that we're all destroying the environment and chucking poison everywhere. So anyway, in Santa Cruz, they wanted to do an EIR, which is an environmental impact report, to try it for the entire county. They were going to try and do an environmental assessment. And they wanted farms to visit so they could come out and just try and understand how a cannabis farm even works. So I volunteered to do that. And that meant my most feared humans in the county were now going to come up to my property. And this was the planning department, who used to, would red tag you and bust you for all this stuff, of the police, all of the folks that used to be our adversaries. I had to take that leap of faith and invite them up for them to check out a farm. I was one of maybe like 10 farms who did this. And I didn't get any like special benefits or anything, but that way they at least knew who I was. It was very cordial. Reality, when you really talk to cops, yes, there's been bad things. There's been, butane labs that have exploded and blown up neighborhoods. So obviously they're not cool with that kind of thing. But if you really ask cops, hey, would you rather, like in the downtown area, would you rather have alcohol or weed? They're like, oh yeah, we'd love it if everyone was just smoking weed. We wouldn't have these fights, wouldn't have drunk driving and such like that. So in reality, they're actually fairly supportive of cannabis, especially here in Santa Cruz. So anyway, we did that, and then I just would show up at all the supervisor meetings and just try and be an engaged constituent stakeholder. And a lot of times government is run by the people who fucking show up. They don't know how any of this works, so they'll listen to the people who show up. You may not always get what you want, but at least now you're building some sort of relationship in the community and with the decision makers who are in charge of your fate. And And some people are like, oh, if you talk to a politician, you're doing backdoor deals and you're paying people off and stuff. It's like, I mean, that happens somewhere, but my experience was they're happy to talk to you and get input, and they actually consider, if you take the time and courtesy to talk to them, they'll speak with you.
Yeah, which is sometimes easier said than done, but good on you, Jeff. Here's a little, I want to slap this comment up here. Humboldt Renegade Farms, what up, guys? Big love from Southern Humboldt. And Moss, I don't know who Moss is, but cheers, folks. I assume these are all your people here. I see you there.
I recognize one of those names. So,
all right.
And by the way, everyone thinks all weed growers hang out together. I'm in Santa Cruz. Humboldt is like a 5 or 6 hour drive away from Santa Cruz. So it's like a whole nother state. But it's cool. I'm starting to connect through the internet and then other things, starting to connect with other farmers in Humboldt and Emerald. And yeah, just across the board, especially the small craft farmers are very cool people. Very cool.
I agree. I'm here with Jeff from Jade Nectar. Jeff, I want to ask you now, I think this is a good time to slide in this thing about Prop 64 and how it sort of got flipped on its head maybe a little bit. I'd love to hear about that. Seems like
so here's the two, in my opinion, the two big switcheroos that really screwed the whole system right off the bat. So what happens is there's proposition voter initiative that has wording, and the voters then vote and it gets passed. Now there's this really important transition period where Prop 64 or whatever the voter initiative is now gets translated into actual regulations at the state. Like they actually write the laws. And this is where the shenanigans can happen. And this is where lobbyists and special interests try and twist and contort some of the things that were in the voter initiative. And what happened here in California was the first massive undermining of the spirit of Prop 64 was in Prop 64, it said for 5 years, there would be no cultivation licenses over an acre. And that was in writing, and there was some ambiguous and some vague writing in Prop 64. But what ended up happening is when that got translated into the actual regulations at the state, a bunch of special interests, I'm not going to say who those were. It's a lot of people know who was responsible for this, but they somehow lobbied the Department of Ag to say, no, you can't have a license over an acre, but you can have unlimited 10,000 square foot licenses all stacked together on the same property. So if you're like myself or some guy named Bob, you could create all these LLCs called Bob 1, Bob 2, Bob 3 LLC and apply for a 10,000 square foot license all on the exact same property. And you could add them all up. And next thing you know, now you have a 20 acre, 30 acre, 40 acre, 50 acre mega grow that's made up of all these stacked 10,000 square foot licenses. And any person with common sense would go, that's not what Prop 64 said. That's not what the voters voted for. That wasn't the spirit. You're undermining the whole spirit and creating a loophole based on technical language. And that's what happened. So any states out there, if you have a voter initiative and the voter initiative is cool, you guys need to stay on top of the regulation as that initiative gets translated into regulations, because that's where the bullshit shenanigans happen. So that was the number one biggest undermining, total betrayal of Prop 64 right there. Because we weren't supposed to have mega farms. We were supposed to have the small farmers would get the foothold, get established, so they wouldn't get out competed and surpluses. Anyway, so that got undone right from the beginning with Prop 64. But the other one that doesn't get much attention, but is really relevant to this conversation, is in Prop 64, the micro business license was tied to outdoor cultivation. Every time you read micro business, it says micro business with 10,000 square feet of outdoor cultivation or of cultivation. I can't even remember if indoor was allowed or not, but it was a cultivation license at its core with these added bonus activities. But when Prop 64 got translated into actual regulations, someone, I've never followed up and found out how this happened, but they actually stripped the requirement for cultivation on the microbiz. So it then said it only requires 3 activities for microbiz, and those 3 activities could be manufacturing, distribution, retail. No cultivation whatsoever. And what happened was then that became actually, for some of the biggest companies, the big mega operators used the micro business as a vertical integration license that would allow them to do all those activities on the same premises. And so it's called a micro business license, but right now in California, we actually have a license category and fee structure for micro business licenses that sell over $80 million in revenue.
That's wild to me, Jeff. That's a
micro business in the translation for Prop 64 to the actual state regulations got completely hijacked, got completely undermined, and it actually got turned into a macro mega operator, vertical integration, corporate consolidation, monopolization license. And so it turns out and then on top of that.
Is that this story, Jeff? Is the Leafly one you sent me?
Yeah, there should be a,
yeah,
the Leafly story talks about the license stacking. Yeah, it talks about the license stacking. It doesn't talk about, hardly anyone talks about this micro business.
Okay, issue. Cool. Well, if you guys want to read that, it's on Leafly.
Yeah, and that will connect the dots. That Leafly thing pretty much connects all the dots, and you can figure out who was very deeply involved with the license stacking and such. And hold on. Do you need to do a break for a second? My girlfriend's driving around calling for the dog.
Go ahead. I can riff for a minute if you need.
Give me 1 second. Let me make sure we're not having a dog issue.
Guys, I'm here with Jeff Nordahl. He's Jade Nectar out in Santa Cruz, California. We're going to get into some good stuff right here. This might take a minute. I had a feel. I know Jeff likes to talk. We've had some nice phone calls. And I got some shit that we've been talking about that we got to get to. I still want to ask him about his cool genetics and shit like that. Oh, did I riff?
Okay.
I did it.
Anyway, yeah, so I think everything's cool. It turns out my electric gate didn't close when my girlfriend left, so my dog may be out running around, but she does this. It's cool.
So I'd like to ask you, aside from Prop 64, what I'd like to ask people this all the time is like, if you could rewrite the legislation, what kind of shit would you keep and what would you change or what would you get rid of? What kind of things do you think? And I know we've probably touched on a few of them here, but if you could redo all the rules and regulations yourself, what would this look like to you, Jeff?
Actually, Prop 64 in spirit, I mean, a lot of people don't like, and it's hard to always know, like, language when nefarious special interests want something, they can change any language or create loopholes and find excuses to pull nefarious shenanigans. But with Prop 64, one of the super huge issues is local control. So, and that was actually my friend who actually had worked on Prop 64 for a portion of it. He worked on the nonprofit collective portion and also some of the micro business protections. But he ended up, without getting too into details, he ended up leaving the Prop 64 final team because of the local control, local jurisdiction issue, which left it up to the counties and cities to create one, whether they allow cannabis or not, but also to create all their guidelines. So we just have this big patchwork of different local municipality things. So it sounds cool at first, like, yeah, giving power to the community and such, but it's just, it's just created a lot of challenges. And a lot of people don't realize this, that in California, over 50% of cities and counties still ban cannabis cultivation and retail activity. So, and one of those real unfortunate catastrophes of that is, if you're thinking about that as medical patient and medical patient access, the promise of Prop 64 was that this was going to deliver safe, affordable, convenient medicine to all Californians. But we currently have 50% of cities and counties that don't even have dispensaries. So that's not really fulfilling the promise to those medical patients. We're trying to find solutions where small farmers could actually ship medical cannabis directly to medical patients' houses. That would solve everything. And who better to provide that medicine than the medical patients, or excuse me, than the small farmers who have decades and decades of history of taking care of medical patients and providing that medicine. So anyway, that's one, is the local control issue. And because California is so huge and vast, that's really created a patchwork of really different ordinances and then straight out banning of cannabis. So that's created issues. But the license stacking issue, just right off the bat, not allowing mega operations to come in, hijack, create surpluses, but also consolidate their operations and stuff that squeeze out the small farmers. You've got to have those protections. And so Prop 64 on paper, what the voters voted for, cool. But then it all got undermined when it got translated into the actual policy and regulations. So Prop 64, again, there was never going to be anything that was perfect. But if the spirit of Prop 64 had persisted and not been undermined by the license stacking, but then also, so the micro business license, can you imagine right now? And we're still trying to bring that to fruition and manifest that, but we're how many years into this now? 6 years since 2018 is when Prop 64 actually kicked in. Yeah. So we're 6 years into this, and but can you imagine if all those hundreds, even thousands of small craft cannabis homestead type farmers who actually live on their farms and they're not trying to build empires, they're just trying to do the homesteader lifestyle and grow the best possible cannabis. Can you imagine if they all had micro business licenses, if they could all self-distribute and not have to be required to use these third-party distributors, and they could do their own in-house manufacturing and such, and then take their products directly to dispensaries? We'd be in a totally different situation where farmers would have way more freedoms and way more agility within the market. But then on top of that, what we're trying to change right now, and if other states could get this right off the bat, is so the concept, at least in California and a lot of other states, small wineries are allowed to actually ship bottles of wine directly to customers. And in California, we've been doing that since 1985. So they saw, they wanted to see the small vineyard model, like the family vineyard model, succeed. So they allowed these small vineyards to actually do their own wine tasting, but then also to do like these wine clubs where each month, um, sorry, each month they would, ship a bottle of wine. That created all of a sudden this revenue stream where a small winery is not going and begging a grocery store to carry their wine or a liquor store to carry their wine. Now they're in charge of their own destiny. They can communicate and develop a relationship with their own customers. And now if that customer lives, a few hundred miles away within California, they can still continuously be selling the product that the customer wants, and now they can get it to them by using the parcel service. And the parcel services can do this because there is an age verification ID check service that a lot of these parcel service companies do, that allows them to ship alcohol directly to customers' homes. And so here in California, and by the way, there's parcel service. We're not talking UPS, FedEx, the post office. We're talking there's small parcel services that work just within California that don't cross state lines, who could actually be delivering small quantities of cannabis directly to customers' homes, shipping it. So a farmer who's way out in the middle of the hills in Mendocino or Humboldt, growing the super high vibing weed way out in a pristine area in the country, but they're way removed from a population center, can now all of a sudden connect with people, and ship product to people living in Los Angeles. And by the way, those people living in Los Angeles, not everyone, but there are people living in Los Angeles who are like, no, I don't want to smoke vape pens and eat fluorescent blue gummies or industrial factory grown weed. I want hippie weed grown by that dready hippie farmer who's out there playing his didgeridoo to his plants. I want that vibe. Like, I live in the rat race in LA. I want some pristine, mountain grown, sun grown, regeneratively grown cannabis. And if you're allowed to ship direct, then all of a sudden that person in LA can have it arrive at their house the next day. And now you're creating a lifelong, the customer's happy. It's not for everyone, but these specialty customers who appreciate that and want to support responsible regenerative agriculture now have an opportunity to get that cannabis, because here's the reality. Those farmers right now to sell in LA have to go beg a retail shop in LA to carry their hippie brand of weed. Even though it's really good weed, most shops are like, we sell Dizzy and gummies and we sell the big brands. That's what our customers want, or for the most part. So it's just a different demographic. It's like trying to sell, blue cheese or Wagyu beef at Taco Bell. It's just, it's not the same. And I'm not trying to throw shade, but it's just, it's not the same customer. And unfortunately, that's kind of what a lot of these dispensaries are catering more towards: the gummies, the vapes, the distillates, and the things that sort of fly off the shelf. And again, that's part of this. That's part of the market. It's cool. We're always going to have Burger King, Taco Bell, McDonald's. But if we don't have also organic food or small farmer the produce that's out there that's available, then that's a real tragedy. So we have to figure out how we can have all these different segments of the market thriving. And through shipping, And by the way, we live in an Amazon, Netflix world. That's how we buy stuff these days. So, and more, that's where it's going. So it's totally appropriate right now for legal lab tested cannabis, small quantities, like up to, let's say, an ounce, to be shipped directly to a customer's home, have license ID check when they deliver, just like they do with alcohol. They've been doing that since 1985. And the cool thing is the farmer gets paid immediately because you don't ship their product till you have the money. So another big problem in California is you could get your product on a shelf in a dispensary in LA. They sell your product. And I hate to say it, but there was just a dispensary owner who got caught on video bragging about how he doesn't.
Norman Yusuf.
You got it. And
by the way, he was trying to open a store in Vermont here.
And by the way, that he got caught on camera.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other motherfuckers who do the same thing who have not been caught on camera. It's a big problem. So when you're doing shipping, the farmer can collect the money up front and then ship it. So the farmer's not getting burned. So there's so many reasons why that makes sense.
Let me slap a out here. Jeff Gates. YouTube unsubscribed me again. No wonder I missed the start. Hello, everyone. Now my headphones are echoing. All right, that's better. And we got we got this guy, Keep Cali Weed out of Vermont. I don't know, man. I kind of like a little Cali weed.
Well, right now, and what we're proposing with shipping is just shipping within.
Right. Yeah.
We're not even dealing with crossing state lines.
So I really liked this idea, Jeff. This is one idea that I heard you talking about in some of your videos. I thought it was a great idea. And, one of the things I really wanted to ask you about was that it sounds like you got some pushback from some people who did not maybe think that your proposal was a great idea.
Yeah. And I'm going to continue to. Anyway, I don't think it's a mystery. I've been pretty clear about it, but I've tried to share my story transparently and honestly without trying to be a dick. But at the same time, this happened, and I think people need to know about it. So our shipping concept, we actually started in January 2024. I did a quick survey just online, like, hey, farmers, I'm in Santa Cruz by myself. You guys up in the Humboldt Emerald Triangle, does anyone else want to ship direct? Am I the only one? And all of a sudden, everyone, well, I won't say everyone, and I don't have a huge following on Instagram, but within a week, 50 farmers signed up and says, yes, we're definitely interested. That would be really great if we could do that, as well as over 50 medical patients signed up and said, we're all, yes, we would love to do this. And I went, okay, cool. So I have my attorney friend, and I'll just say because as soon as you say attorney to people, it's like attorney and politician. Everyone's like, it's like some awful human.
You got to have an attorney friend. If you don't, you should get one.
Okay. So I'm going to say my attorney friend, here are his credentials. His name is Alan Hopper. Look him up. He started at the ACLU, so the American Civil Liberties Union? I don't know.
Union.
Okay. He was a criminal justice reform dude, like right out of college. That's why he became an attorney. He wanted to do good in the world and reform the criminal justice system and be a part of that force on this planet. So he was working at the ACLU. And what was going on? So this is late 90s, and this is when the AIDS epidemic was going on, especially in Bay Area. Obviously, it was a massive problem. And this is when a lot of folks started realizing who were dealing with AIDS that cannabis was very helpful with relieving symptoms and such like that. So for folks who are not aware of it, like a lot of our cannabis freedoms that were won here in California were really fought for by the gay community Dennis Peron's one, and a lot of it stemmed from the AIDS crisis. So what ended up happening is we actually had sort of medical collectives here in California, but you had to have a doctor's recommendation. So then doctors were willing to write these cannabis recommendations, but then the federal government said, who hated cannabis, said, doctors, if you write a medical recommendation, we regulate doctors federally. We're going to yank your license. We're going to shut down your doctor's office. So that was, so anyway, Alan Hopper, my friend, that was one of his first big cases, was defending and taking on the federal government. I don't know all the intricacies of that case, but that's kind of where he started in his cannabis legal career. And he successfully defended and got the right for these medical doctors to write medical recommendations without the feds yanking their license. That's pretty cool. So then he moved on to, he had another big case in San Diego, where San Diego was trying to get rid of medical collectives and such like that. So he moved on to that and actually successfully won that case. So medical collectives could happen in San Diego. And then it all kind of, there were other cases, but then it all kind of crescendoed with here in Santa Cruz. There's a big medical collective called WAM, WAMM, not the band Wham, not George Michael, but it was the Women's and Men's Medical Marijuana or Association of Medical, something like that. I don't even know. It's WAM. And so, and WAM was giving out cannabis to AIDS patients and chronically ill. They were a big medical collective. Don't want to dwell on them too much, but and they also were very friendly with the local government here in Santa Cruz, because we have very progressive people in the government for the most part. And long story short, the feds didn't like that. So it seems as though the feds were trying to make an example out of WAM and raided them. And yeah, it was looking like the people involved, were facing huge prison sentences. Like, really, the feds really wanted to make an example of them and basically decapitate some of the poster child heroes in medical cannabis. So Alan Hopper then at the ACLU was the person who litigated and defended them at the federal level. And the case was never totally won, but it just got the feds to back off. And that's what actually paved the way for then the Cole memo, which then said that the DEA was no longer going to spend money enforcing cannabis in medical legal states. And that's what paved the way then for legalization. Colorado, Washington, and Oregon beat California to it because our first version was way too corporate. But anyway, so that's my attorney friend. I'm very proud to be friends with him. And he happened to, at the time, it was one of these cosmic timing things. I don't want to talk too much about his personal stuff, but he has trouble working with law firms and client because he will not work with corporate sellout companies. And that's where the money's at for attorneys right now, is to go work for the big corporate raiders. And he doesn't do that. So, and all the cool small farmers are all broke. So yeah, financially, where do you find work if you're not going to sell your soul? So anyway, but at that time, he was in between work. So he had some time. And I contacted him, said, hey, a lot of people want this shipping thing. Would you be up for brainstorming and trying to figure out how to write this legislatively so we can actually, because we don't want to start reaching out to people with a concept or something on a cocktail napkin. You have to have a working document, something tangible to present. otherwise it'll never happen. So we did some brainstorming. He looked into it. I'm going to disclose some information. He said, how much can you pay? And I said, 5,000. If you went and hired a law firm to write a bill, especially of this intricacy, to research it and figure out how to make it all work, you'd be at 50 grand to 100 grand minimum.
No shit.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah, let's fucking do it. Let's change the world. Let's make the world a better place. And he's a very outside the box thinker. I hope he doesn't mind me saying about this about him, but he's just cool. And so we figured out the mechanics and logistics, how the shipping thing could work within the regulations. And the whole trick when you're doing legislation, you can't just blow up the regulations. You need to figure out the most elegant way to use the current regulations and just do little tweaks that open up new opportunities. And the trick with the small farmers and selling direct is there really was an entire matrix designed by the special interests that did not want the small farmers selling direct. So you have to get really creative to find that crack in the matrix where the farmers can break out and start doing things. And we figured out how to actually do it. And that is on using the micro business license. And like what we spoke about before was that non-storefront retail, which is like a pizza delivery service. So all we did was take that non-storefront retail and we tweaked it just a little bit, where instead of driving to a customer's house and delivering like a pizza guy, you would take that order, put it in a cardboard box, slap a shipping label on it, and then take it to the parcel service depot and drop it off there. And then they would take it to deliver it to the customer's home and sign for it. And now I'm going to give there's still life in this project. We're looking to work with senators and assembly members this fall for the 2025 legislative session. But how you crack the matrix is if the medical patient, and by the way, we're designing this as a medical patient access bill, so the small farmers could ship to medical patients, and it's a medical patient access bill, and especially for those medical patients that are in dry counties that currently ban cannabis retail, we got to fulfill the promise to those medical patients to give them safe, affordable, convenient cannabis medicine, because we're not, yeah.
Can I throw a question at you here from Aaron?
Yeah.
I think this is all right question here. Aaron says, one of the pushbacks I'm hearing from the farmers is the perception that Jeff's initiative only applies to medical grows. Could you please illuminate this?
Okay. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. There's no such thing really as a medical grow. A medical patient can purchase recreational cannabis. There's no division. Now, if you're doing just a medical grow, then you can do, let's say, for tinctures. So recreational tinctures, you can go up to 1,000 milligrams THC. If you're making it as a medical product, you can go up to 2,000 milligrams per bottle of tincture. So there's certain things where you can have higher potencies and such, but a medical patient, so someone in a wheelchair hooked up to an IV and a ventilator and an iron lung can wheel into a dispensary, show their medical card, they can buy recreational products and still get their use their medical card to save on sales tax, which is kind of bullshit. That's all they're saving as sales tax. But yeah, medical patients are buying your recreational, whatever you call it, normal standard grown cannabis all day long. There is no concept that you have a medical card, so you can't go buy flower that doesn't have a medical, that wasn't designated as medical. Medical patients can buy anything they want and save on sales tax. So this is the problem, is there's so much misinformation where people just don't. And traditionally, and farmers got into growing cannabis because they hate dealing with politics and regulations and all this bullshit. So this is kind of this horrific contradiction. Is farmers grow cannabis to be farmers because they love nature, they love worms, they love plants, they love being outside, and they hate not hate, but most of them have an aversion to the rat race. And the last thing they want to do is sit here and read regulations and talk to
boring. It's fucking boring.
Yeah, and it's not exciting, and it's not really the culture they want to be a part of. They don't want to go lobby and hang out in Sacramento and talk to politicians. No, they want to grow weed out in the middle of nowhere. And that's beautiful. But the problem is, when you don't have representation and you're not engaged with that system, the special interests, the corporate, the politicians start coming after what you got. And if you can't defend yourself, and that's what's coming now, there's a lot of value in the Emerald Triangle region, and there's a lot of special interests who would like to. It's not that different than let's say in a rather undeveloped country that has tons of mineral resources. The U.S. will come for those resources, and they may build you a school and build you a library and hand out bags of rice, and the Peace Corps will come in and be heroes for you. Meanwhile, all your resources are flying out the back door, loaded on boats, and they'll extract billions of your country's resources and give you a few bags of rice and a school. So don't think that doesn't happen in rural communities in the United States that happen to have some resources that these special interests see value in. So, and not trying to get paranoid or neurotic about that, but this is just a reality we all have to understand. So, yeah. So anyway, and that's what I may need myself, for whatever reason. I don't like regulations. My happy place is just growing weed. That's all I wanted to do. But I can see now our homesteader lifestyle is under threat. And if we don't go and fight for it, defend it, and try and carve out some opportunities, some market opportunities for our survival, we're going to be extinct. You're just not. And the politicians and special interests are going to say, hey, if you want to keep growing weed, we're going to develop this 50-acre mega farm, and you can keep growing weed. Just put on a little name tag. You can work for us. And most of us got into weed. We kind of free spirits, and not everyone wants to go work at the mega farm, LA venture capitalist funded mega farm that's just got set up in your community. So what we want is small farmers to have freedom, independence, access to markets. And if we can figure out ways for all the small farmers to get those micro business, especially the home occupation, cottage micro biz with non-storefront retail, and if we can get the shipping thing passed, then all of a sudden we've got hundreds of small craft farmers who can now do their own marketing, can do their own communicating with medical patients and customers. And then all of a sudden, now it's really a free market. It's not a constructed corporate consolidation funnel monopolized market where they're in control of all these choke points in the supply chain. There's a place for that, but when you make that a requirement, that's when the nefarious shit happens. And that's when, historically, everywhere you go, the small, like coffee growers, frankincense harvesters in Somalia. There's a video about that on Vice about Somalia frankincense harvesters, how they got screwed by doTERRA. It's been going on since the beginning of time, but we really see that, like myself, we all know that the corporate consolidation, industrial, mega scale agriculture model is not sustainable. It's bad for the planet. It's bad for the economy. It consolidates all the wealth and power with just a small few, billionaires. And it's not sustainable or good for communities. So we want to see cannabis be a decentralized, small farmer, craft agriculture celebration of the small farmer. And now that we have shipping and we're in this like Amazon type world, I'm not saying ship through Amazon, but if you're able to ship, and now all of a sudden small farmers out in the middle of Mendo or Humboldt or Trinity County can now connect with customers in Los Angeles. And it's a beautiful thing. And that would only take it'd represent maybe 5% of the total market. But then we'd have just this cool, diverse, we'd be celebrating our legacy farmers and the culture, and it would allow people who want to live the homesteader lifestyle in a responsible way would then be able to actually pay their bills and go on vacation every once in a while and just
Not be crazy.
Yeah, and just live a normal, life. It's not a Ferrari quest. Nobody, how are you going to drive a Lamborghini on a dirt road out in the middle of Humboldt? Like, no one's after that. It's more of a lifestyle. It's a culture that we want to preserve and a way of life. And through cannabis is a cool, and they're not being outsiders with society. They're contributing. Small farmers are contributing super high quality, high vibing medicine to the entire community. So it's actually a beautiful contribution. It's almost like being a monk or someone, who goes and separates themselves from the rat race, but can help with spiritual assistance for the society.
I'm going to slap Aaron's response. He said, that's exactly what I thought. This medical situation is the misinformation that the nefarious opposition is spreading to trick small farmers into doubting Jeff's initiative. It's a non-issue. And then he says the homesteader farmer relationship absolutely provides the finest quality medicine. No question.
Yep. So if anyone's thinking by doing a medical patient access shipping bill that you would have to convert your farm to being a medical license, that is complete, utter bullshit. That is wrong. That is wrong information. I am a micro business license. I make wellness tinctures, these olive oil wellness tinctures. I work with tons of medical patients, and I am not a medical licensed micro business farm. I am a recreational, just whatever you call us. Our products, our tinctures are not designated medical. But I have tons of customers who have lupus, Parkinson's, Crohn's disease, migraines, fibromyalgia, who have medical cards who go buy our tinctures at a dispensary. All medical does is allows you to go to 2,000 milligrams THC in a bottle instead of the 1,000 recreational count. That's it.
Which is a nice advantage, but still 1,000 is good. That's a nice dose. You can't, like, Vermont's very tight on that. I don't know.
Well, and I would never make, but the thing is if I were to make 2,000 milligram tinctures and designate them medical, then that would deny access to all the people who don't have a medical card. They wouldn't be able to buy our tinctures. So we just make them where they're accessible to everyone.
Good point.
And 1,000 milligrams in 1 ounce, that's pretty potent.
All right. So I'm going to keep this moving here. I want to ask you, before, when we were in the green room before the interview, you said you had to make a phone call to a senator and you're asking him about this bill. And I'd like to know about this bill, maybe what 1111 or something that they're trying to
Oh,
pass.
AB 1111. So
What's
I'm going
the
to get
deal with that?
myself in trouble, but I'm going to just default to honesty and transparency. Um, Unfortunately, right now, there's kind of almost there's what's being created is almost this culture of tribalism and us and them and which team you're on and if you're in a trade group, and then if you criticize or question a trade group, then you're the enemy and now we need to destroy you and spread misinformation about you. And there's, I really hate to say this, but there's kind of like this weird authoritarian, almost cult like vibe going on right now with these trade groups. And I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to be um, mean about it, but that has been my experience. And yeah, with our shipping bill, I actually reached out to some of these trade groups and presented it. I don't want to lay out this whole grievance thing right now, but yeah, they were not warm and fuzzy and welcoming. And even if they were actually really busy with other projects, I thought they were just going to stay neutral and agnostic. Um, but it turns out for some reason, this shipping where the farmers could get a micro business license, be totally free and independent. You could still work with distributors. I think there really is a place for distribution and also for retail. So this is not anti-distribution or anti-retail. It's just right now the power structures skewed because they're required. So the small farmers really, stuck. And that becomes a power dynamic that strips all the power away from the farmer. So anyway, there just seems to be, for some reason, some hints of not wanting to see the small farmer be independent and free and totally self-sufficient, where they could make the choice to not work with a distributor or retailer if they wanted to. In a perfect world, the farmer can sell direct and then also work with distributors and retailers, just like wine and alcohol. There's all these different revenue streams. You can sell direct, but then you can also be sold at specialty shops. And if that shop's 400 miles away, yes, you work with a distributor to do that because you can't drive all the way to that shop. So anyway, but there does seem to be, for some reason, some massive almost hostility towards the concept of the farmers being totally independent and free. It's like everyone right now wants to pimp the farmer. And they'll say, like, we had a company here called Flocana, which I think a lot of people know. And it turns out they were backed by a lot of Altria, so big tobacco money and such like that. I don't want to totally get into all that. But Flocana was like, oh, yeah, we support the small farmer. Look, we're doing all these videos saying how great the small farmer is. But the reality was Flocana was seeing the small farmer as their product. So as soon as the small farmer says, hey, Flocana, thanks for the video about my farm, but you know what? This isn't working out for me. I'm going to go on my own and sell direct. You think Flocana would be like, yeah, that's great. We started this $200 million company just to set small farmers free so they don't have to work with us. No, Flocana, it's kind of like a music record company. Yeah, they'll promote you as a recording artist because they're selling your records and they're getting, the lion's share of the profits. So yeah, they'll promote you all day long because you're making money for them. But as soon as if you were a musician said, you know what, I'm going to go on tour myself and I'm going to release my own album that I recorded in my basement and sell that myself. No, the record company would sue the shit out of you and say that's a violation of their contract. So you really have to watch out for who says they're pro farmer. Are they pro farmer because they want to get a slice and they want to be your pimp? Or are they pro farmer where they just really want to see you succeed and they, for some reason, want to see the small farmers be independent and see the underdog actually win, for once, and such. And so this is an interesting, so our bill, which was basically totally setting the small farmer free to ship direct to patients and customers, hit some serious opposition with these trade groups who claim to be representing and advocating for the small farmers. And we actually, so I had met with some of these trade groups. They weren't interested, but they kind of said they were working on some other bills, so it would just distract from what they were working on. And I said, no problem. Not the right time. The universe didn't align on this one, so no problemo. But we still believe in this concept. So I actually went out and started talking with senators and assembly members, and we actually got a local senator who thought it sounded pretty cool. And it turns out that local senator was from Santa Cruz and had actually worked on the AIDS project back in the 90s, and he was very aware of our whole Santa Cruz medical cannabis compassion culture. And so he was kind of stoked on it, thought it sounded like, yeah, this could be a good feel-good thing and help medical patients. And this is in line with the whole medical cannabis culture that he was a part of from the beginning. Even though he's not really a cannabis enthusiast, but he's supportive if it's helping people. So anyway, he started working with us and we were getting into it, and we were actually going to try and squeeze it in this legislative session. But I kid you not, I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I know this pisses off a lot of people, especially who are like super tribal about their trade group and are like, how dare you question or criticize them? But I'm just going to tell you honestly what happened is this trade group that claims to advocate for the small farmers communicated with the senator and told them very clearly that they did not support this, that our bill would divide the community, and that this was going to be a really bad thing. And because they have, a voice, and this group has kind of branded themselves as the voice of small farmers in Sacramento, in our capital, that was enough. And this group knew what they were doing. That was enough to cause the senator's staff to put the brakes on, because we were already scrambling because it was late in the legislative session. So they just said, okay, not everyone's on the same page here, so this needs some work. So let's pick this back up later this year for next year's session. And that's where we're at. So October, November of 2024, we're going to start re-engaging with assembly members and senators to try and work on the shipping bill. But so that's what's happening. But yeah, it was a real head scratcher, because I thought these trade groups were just neutral. Like, hey, we're working on our own thing. But I thought they'd be like, hey, but good luck. This is a tough world. The small farmers are taking a beating. So anything that can crack the matrix and free up the farmers a bit, yeah, we may not formally be able to support you because we're busy, but yeah, go get them. And maybe this will lead to something that can benefit everyone, and maybe we can work together later. That's what I kind of thought was going on. But when this communication came in, and the senator's staff, because when I learned that that someone had communicated to them that they were very negative about it and not supportive of our bill, At first, the senator's staff didn't disclose. And I said, well, this is confusing because I have all these farmers who are supportive and a lot of people have been supportive. So I need to report back to our farmers. So can you tell? And I don't even know who to engage with, who's negative, because I'd like to call them and try and find some common ground here. And that's when they told me who it was. And big surprise, everyone already knows this in California who's been following this. But yeah, it was Origins Council. They, in a way, you could look at it, yeah, they sabotaged our bill. And it's still a head scratcher. Why couldn't they just stay neutral? And if we actually made some, got some traction, made some headway, what if we actually passed this? Because historically, medical patient access bills pass. No, most politicians don't want to be painted as anti-medical patient. So
I am gonna try to get Janine Coleman on the show too. I'm trying to get a hold of her. I'd love to have an interview with her and see what she has to say about it.
And I'm not trying to like voodoo doll or witch hunt or try and play dirty or anything. I had nothing against them. I actually reached out to them, shared the bill, and was like, hey, let's collaborate. Let's find solutions. What works for you guys? You guys are up in Emerald, so I'd like to learn more about, the farmer situation in that area and connect with more farmers so we can, make things better and find out what would really be a solution. And man, it was just a one-way. I'm sorry, I'm unloading some grievance here, but it was a one-way communication of not in, and unfortunately I've heard this from other people as well, is there's just kind of the word on the street is that group and some of the other groups just do not play well with others, just do not seem to have any interest in collaborating. And the very bizarre thing is the people who are running these organizations are not farmers. So what are they? They don't really have a stake in this, and they're more interested, if they're going to have a career, it's going to be as a trade group and expanding their political power and their political connections and their trade group. And
there's a comment from York says Vermont Growers Association has the same vibes in York. If you're still listening, send me a message on the YouTube's later or something, dude.
So again, this did not start out as a witch hunt, and I'm in this very bizarre position where I had this, like, our bill, this shipping bill, kind of forced folks to play their cards and play their hand. And all of a sudden I was like, what have I stumbled into here? Why are these trade groups so hostile? And then it turns out it gets weird. And I'm sorry, I have some grievance. There's some serious questions that need to be asked, because these trade groups, it turns out, usually what happens when you have legislation, and if we had a senator already working on it, this wasn't just some, you can try and demean me and say I'm a rookie, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but I wasn't just some random dude who took a bong rip and then wrote something on a cocktail napkin and was like, this is a great idea. We should go tell all the members, tell everyone I've seen the light. We actually had a very respectable California senator working on this, engaged with us. So the trade groups at that point, sort of their structure and obligation to their members is that they would then present the bill. And I had actually offered multiple offers to drive up to meet with members, to do a Zoom so I could present it, because there's some complexities. There's a lot of little details within regulation where you want to make sure everything gets explained and it's kind of a question answered a discussion, give and take. You can't really just do a one-way street presentation of information. People are going to have questions and you want to answer those. And so you get clarity. So I had offered to drive up, meet with farmers. I had offered to do Zoom and presentations. And it turns out, from my understanding, is the farmers never saw our bill. Some of them, when I started going on Instagram, sort of reporting on what happened, and I had to report back to the farmers who were supporting us. I had to tell them what happened. I couldn't just go, oh, you know what? Never mind. Forget it. Over it. Moving on to something else. I had to tell them what happened. They were like, what? Yeah, what the fuck happened?
And by the way, there's your Instagram in case anyone's interested. It's Jade Nectar, if you could imagine.
Yeah, there you go. So I just want to be clear. I didn't start this to be an agitator. I didn't start this to even be a political person. I kind of had the sense that we figured out some logistics and ways that shipping could happen. And I thought I was going to present this to a trade group and they'd be like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's an interesting thing. And by the way, it wasn't just me. I ran it through multiple licensing directors, people who really understand regulation, and it all checked out. They were like, yeah, this actually checks out. This is legally feasible. This really could work. And we even worked with transportation attorneys because it turns out the Fed Department of Transportation doesn't regulate cargo if it doesn't cross state lines. So we did our fucking due diligence and researched this and ran it through multiple very experienced regulators who could review it. And yeah, it all checked out. So I had offered to share this with farmers and with members so could explain it. And for whatever reason, that never happened. The farmers never really understood it. And now the farmers, what they're being told is not really what's in the bill. They are being fed a mass distortion, and I'd even say mis and intentional disinformation about what's in our bill. And if there's any questions, I just want to say also our proposal was a draft. This wasn't set in stone. So if there was a problem, like someone's like, oh, this wouldn't work for me, or, this could be a loophole where corporations could game it. And we're like, we didn't think about that. Yes, we'll tighten up that language. We'll close that loophole. Because, yeah, the whole point of this is kind of to do a reboot, do-over for the license stacking debacle, to where the farmers got really betrayed. We'd like to do a reboot, do-over, and give the small farmers first crack at this direct to patient shipping that could then lead to direct to consumer shipping. And yeah, it would be a game changer. It would be a whole different situation. And now if the big corporate cannabis situation were a success story, we might be in a different situation. But we've got MedMen, Herbal, Flocana, all the big folks. Hey, I went to Harvard Business School. Shut up, hippies. Move over, 215ers. We'll take it from here. We know we're the big boys. We know how to run a business. They've all eaten shit. It's not a success. So now it's like, maybe cannabis is different. Maybe it's time to try some new, fresh ideas. And cannabis is an artisan it's best when it's done at a small scale with really good, loving intention and care. And this could all pencil out like 1,000 small farmers who can ship direct could provide an amazing amount with very high quality medicine through shipping, but then could also supply a lot of what's needed at retail shops as well. And yeah, we could bypass the industrial mega ag model that we all know is totally dysfunctional and bad for the planet and just is a race to the bottom soulless drives a spirit plant into just being another soulless commodity.
So let me ask you one more thing. I know you're at the Emerald Cup, and I saw that a video, and you actually reposted some comments from a guy who's been on my show 3 times, Dan Pomerantz, from Rebel, who is an Origins Council member. And I was just curious what your take was on going to that. It was like a breeding panel or something.
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Well, look, I thought Dan's comments were very interesting.
Yeah.
Myself,
okay. And again, I would rather be known as someone who speaks honestly, and I'm not doing this to be an agitator or a shit talker or create controversy. I'm just giving my honest feedback and experience of what was going on. And I've gone to the Emerald Cup. I think first one was like maybe 2015. So I was maybe a little late to the game, maybe 2014, 15, somewhere in there. So I went, and it's definitely changed quite a bit since then. And to tell you the truth, the last one I'd gone to since Prop 64 was in 2019. And I kind of said, that's probably my last one. Yeah, there's definitely a corporate trade show vibe. It's not all that different from going to like an insurance convention or an insurance trade show in Vegas, only instead of all the insurance agents and brokers being drunk on pina coladas, it's just a bunch of people super stoned. That's kind of, now, I'm not saying my opinion is valid or that's what it was, but that's just my experience going to the Emerald Cup recently. So yeah, this year, and I wasn't planning on going, but I went because Billy Strings was also playing in Berkeley, just a few minutes away that night, and I was going to the Billy Strings concert. So I said, I might as well just go check out Emerald Cup. And again, I have mass respect for the folks who created the Emerald Cup and what it was and the legacy of it. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's one of these things that has also, I mean, maybe there's a way to change it in some way, but yeah, it has not retained that same spirit through Prop 64ins or the corporatization. I haven't been to Burning Man for a long time too, so I don't know. But Burning Man's not people selling shit at a trade show, so it's still pretty wild from what I hear. But as things get bigger and go mainstream, they run the risk of not having the same spirit as when they were smaller. But yes, that breeder discussion, very bizarre. I was actually sitting there in the audience, and to be quite honest, I'm just being honest, within about 15 minutes, I got up and left because it was not really informative. It was just 4 people sitting in chairs on a stage with a microphone with and I don't necessarily need to have a PowerPoint presentation, but it just kind of was a bunch of rambling, and then seemed to sort of be promoting this Legacy Genetics DCC grant that's going on, which also Origins Council. I'm not a fan of right now Origins Council. I'd be happy to work with them, and I'd be happy to do fence mending if we just had a massive understanding and reboot and start over. I don't fucking care.
How about this, Jeff?
Yeah.
Would you be, if I could get Janine on the show, would you be agreeable to speaking with her if I could get you both in the same room?
Yeah, I think the community deserves that, because right now they're hearing these two or whatever, these different opinions and versions of stories, but it's never coming together in it's kind of like having 2 news commentator, opinion people just spouting opinions, but it's not actually, and I don't want to say it's a debate. I don't want to debate anyone. We're just trying to reach some common understanding where goals and where people are coming from and what the actual goals are and how we can achieve those goals. And we seem to have extremely different opinions. And then what happens when you don't understand someone and you don't communicate, and then you suspect they may be coming from a nefarious intention, then you start projecting all this weird shit. And I've heard stories now that, like, I'm a Monsanto operative who's working on a secret breeding program with GW Pharmaceuticals, and I'm like actually just a disruptor that's coming from some big corporate interest to like take down the trade group so we can come in and it's like, dude, that ain't what's up. How about we have an actual conversation and we may actually find some common ground and some understanding. So yes, I would be massive, and I've offered to do that. But
Janine,
so far,
come on.
Yeah. So, and you're cool. Maybe it's cool to do it through Vermont.
I'll be happy to. Yeah, an intermediary across the country. I tell you what, maybe it would help a little more if I read this comment from Dan, who is an Origins Council member, and I want to read what he posted. And this was about the post you made and this grant money from the DCC. And Dan said, how much grant money? I was on the breeders panel at the Cup with them today and was disappointed to learn it was a self-promoting infomercial about their organizations and the grant instead of an educational discussion about cannabis breeding. Super lame. And I thought there was, there's another one. Oh, it's all small. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read.
I'm not trying to be a dick here, but
that's one of their members. So I think that's
one of their members, and he was on the stage. I was feeling the same sentiments sitting in the audience, and I had the freedom to get up and leave. He had to stay on the stage for the whole presentation. I'm sorry. Again, I'm not trying to be snarky and mean, but sometimes honesty is the way to go. And yeah, it was not an informative education, and it felt like an infomercial. And what he said, he was living right in the middle of it, and that was the vibe. And he's a member. So I have my own bias at this point because I've had some unpleasant experiences with this group, but that's how it felt. So yeah, sorry, but yeah, I'd agree.
Oh, here's the other comment he made. I was very disappointed by this breeders panel. It was supposed to be about breeding and genetics, but ended up being self-promotion, pitching policy, and their grant/agenda. Who's getting that grant money from the DCC, and how is it all going to be spent? As a member of Origins through my membership of HCGA, I find this shameful and exactly what's wrong with politics. How about you give me some of that grant money? Every year, the Cup has a breeders panel with last year's winner to talk to genetics. I finally won, and it was lame opportunism. We didn't even get to talk about weed. So whack and exclusionary. Panel discussions should stick to education about the topic, not be a sales pitch. I didn't even say the name of my company or talk about my products once because that was not the point. That's all.
Good for him.
Yeah. So, Janine, if you're listening, I'd love to talk to you. I would absolutely moderate or host a conversation between you guys. I think you both probably have some good ideas, and I think maybe there's some people that have been a little confused about the ideas that you're presenting because maybe, and you present them in a very long-winded way, but when I've looked at the totality of it, I mean, I like the ideas you've presented. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't see anything here that's unreasonable to me.
It's and here's the really bizarre thing as well. And by the way, we live in a 30-second attention span world these days.
Yeah.
So to understand all the complexities and nuance of a major legislative shift, which would shift the power, and I'm not talking like power like megalomaniac power. I'm talking, but would all of a sudden give power to the smallest of the small farmers, who I think are really the rock star heroes.
Me too.
The heart and soul of, and let's all be serious here. We're not growing broccoli. Nothing against broccoli, but this is a psychedelic plant that has an energy to it that changes perspective, that has a spiritual element to it. So do you want your cannabis that you're consuming, that most likely you're consuming it to have some sort of uh, insight or enlightenment or just creativity vibe? That's why you're taking it into your body. Do you want that grown in an industrial corporate venture capital operation, or do you want that grown by almost, and I don't want to overdo it, but some of these homestead farmers, it's like almost being like a monk. It's a spirit, you're out in nature, you're in tune with your plants, and a lot of times you're walking around barefoot. You wake up early in the morning with the sun coming up, and you're just loving your plants, and you're knowing that other people you may never meet are going to take that plant into their body, and you're hoping that that can have a positive effect on their life. And I'm not trying to get woo woo, but that's why people like cannabis. You're not just eating fucking broccoli. It changes your perspective, gives you enlightenment. So if that's what you're looking for in cannabis, how about you have some sort of like almost like monk like folks living out in the middle of fucking nowhere in nature, in a pristine environment, spending their entire season, summer, months and months and months, nurturing these plants with love and intention. So yeah, that's and again, I'm not trying to be some sanctimonious woo-woo hippie. I mean, but that's kind of the point of cannabis, right? We want to get a little woo-woo. So let's have the fucking woo-woos grow the and we can do it, and they're working hard. There's also this notion that cannabis farmers are just lazy degenerates who can't do anything other.
That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. I've seen these people. I go to a farm, man. These motherfuckers never stop.
It's if you're really growing it on a small, and you're doing the work yourself, and I'm not talking like plantation style where you just sit there and bark orders at workers who run around and do all the work for you. I'm not talking that. I'm talking, and this is what the home occupation cottage cannabis would be. It would be where you don't have actually employees, or you only have maybe one or two employees that might help you at peak harvest time where you need some more hands. But it's really that farmer nurturing that cannabis all the way from seed to harvest. And that is a beautiful, amazing amount of effort and dedication to that plant to get it all the way there. Because what I tell people is cannabis is really easy to grow. It's a really easy plant to grow. The problem is it's really easy to fuck it up too. And you have over 6 months, every single day, there's an opportunity to fuck it up and ruin it. So you have to go 6, 7, 8 months without fucking up. And to do that right, it takes dedication and discipline and care and all those beautiful qualities we want. If we're going to consume it, we want to know all that care and love went into that plant. At least I do.
So here's what I'd like to do. I was going to ask you about all your grow techniques and genetics. What I'm thinking, because I'm getting kind of tired here. What I'm thinking is,
I gotta go too.
maybe we could split that off into a different show, part 2, sure. And I could ask you one more question before we get out of here. Yeah, I want to know about this idea of trying to get patents on genetics. I heard you talking about that a little bit, and it's this kind of reminds me of what happened with the corn industry. It feels very similar.
Okay. So and I'm learning more about the actual technicalities of getting patents on cannabis too. And by the way, at least my knowledge, I hope I'm not saying something stupid here, but I don't think there's any patented cannabis genetics yet. And the reality of the logistics of some people that I know who actually are familiar with how you get genetics patented, is it's a multi-year process. You have to do test trials and trial grows and everything has to like breed true and all that. And there's shortcuts to that through genetic engineering and everything. But here's my basic take on cannabis. I'm going to just give sort of like logistical reality, and then also sort of the woo woo spiritual. Sorry, and my bat phone's going. But first of all, I think cannabis genetic patenting is a fool's errand. It's a total fucking waste of time. And in reality, even the California genetics, most of them are already in the public domain, because if you've ever sold Trainwreck, whatever Trainwreck actually is, but if you've ever sold your genetics before, you the farmer have already put your genetics in the public domain, so they're unpatentable by anyone, by yourself or someone. So a lot of folks don't realize that if you've ever sold your cannabis, so to patent it, you'd have to not sell it for a number of years, because the second you sell it, your genetic or the product or the genetic, or give a cut or clone or anything, once it goes into any kind of commercial thing, it's now in the public domain and you can't even patent it yourself. Now, as far as so that's one thing. Now, as far as creating an actually true breeding genetic that's patentable, that you'd have to prove that you totally created it yourself. This is with like Monsanto and some of these folks who do actually patent their genetics. My understanding is that's like a 7-year process. They're speeding it up by doing genetic engineering, but then they have to do all this like trial crop stuff. And I wish it's not really my specialty. This is just someone else told me this, because this is kind of their field, or they're aware of it, and they've done work with other plants, not cannabis patents, but yeah, you have to go through this multi-year process to prove it out, and that it's yours and that it's totally unique. And a lot of that you have to demonstrate. You almost have to like make it, and then it gets into genetic engineering and such like that. So oh, and I wanted to say one other thing. So this concept too right now that's going around that, hey, come in and document your genetics and get a leaf pressing and we'll sequence your DNA, and then give you a certificate with a little smiley face sticker on it. So now you, the farmer, your genetics have been documented and patented. That has zero legal status. Because first of all, how do you know you didn't just run over to some other dude's farm, cut a piece of cannabis off his farm, and come in and DNA sequence it and get a dry leaf pressing? You have to prove ownership and everything like that. It's a really high burden, is my understanding of it. But if you just want to protect your own genetics, if you've already sold your genetics and gotten them out there, and just do some sort of documentation, I guess the DNA sequencing and but it wouldn't hold up in court, because there's no way you could prove that what's sequenced and dried. I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd have to prove ownership, that was actually your plant. Like when you go to court. And by the way, in court, just so everyone knows, even when you're right, you have to pay sometimes millions of dollars to prove you're right. So if you're involved with like Monsanto or someone like that who you think poached your genetics somehow, you can say, hey, you stole my cannabis variety. You're growing acres of it in your greenhouse. That's mine. So I'm going to shut you down and make you stop it. That big mega corporation is going to say, okay, sue us. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're probably going to lose. And you're going to spend the next 5 years of your life in this toxic lawsuit. So what I'm getting at is it's not even worth it. It's probably not provable. There aren't patented cannabis already. All the lines go back to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then it gets into who really owns these genetics. And then if you want to get on the woo-woo spiritual side,
yes, go.
That's probably, at least when I smoke cannabis, I'm from a Grateful Dead culture of communal sharing and share the love. And you go to a show and everyone's passing out joints and just, it's a love fest of sharing the love. And that's what's so beautiful and fun about it. So to take cannabis, which generally creates an emotion of sharing, and these are and non-ownership, to then say, oh, what I'm going to do with cannabis is I'm going to claim ownership to this and make this as mine, and I'm going to pay attorneys, and then I'm going to go after anyone who tries to even grow something closer, and I'm going to sue the fuck out of you because that's mine.
Yikes.
That is, you're smoking the wrong fucking weed if that's your inspiration from smoking weed. I'm sorry. That's just like the antithesis of cannabis culture and sharing philosophy. So it's
Amen.
just,
yeah.
So that's just kind of fucked up on itself. But then, so what I think would be my personally is just let's bypass this whole patenting ownership bullshit. Maybe if we as a community just want to get that off the table, so that's not even a threat to infringing on people's freedoms to grow cannabis and everything, just put it all in the public domain, have some sort of project like DCC. If you want to do something really cool with a grant, let's go collect all the genetics and just get them out in the public domain where they can never be patentable and make it basically impossible to ever patent any of this stuff. And then we can move on as a community and just say cannabis it's just a resource, just like water and clean air that we all have a right to. It's a plant. No one invented it. So let's cut the fucking ownership bullshit out of it. And let's just get on with, breeding cool strains. And part of the game is if you create something really cool, just if you want to be involved in cannabis, you just have to accept that someone else might get your cut somehow, or get a seed, or an employee that was working on your farm may take some cuttings and they go, and just be at peace with that's how cannabis has always worked. It used to be bag seed, like cannabis genetics move freely because of the seeds, and that's how it got around. That was part of the beauty that disseminated cannabis throughout the world. So let's just embrace that as a reality, that you can't own cannabis, you can't bottle it up, you can't keep it out. And if you bred something really beautiful, share it.
I definitely can't keep it. I seem to always be running out.
Yeah, and then your reward and your treat is you get like bragging rights for document that you created it, and it's your strain. And then you get street credit, and everyone thinks you're fucking cool for creating an awesome plant. But it just seems like a waste of time, waste of energy, bad karma, and a fool's errand to try and pursue the ownership thing. And it just doesn't seem to be what cannabis spirit wants. Anyway, it wants to expand.
There you go, dude. That's that woo-woo shit right there. I agree with you. I'm gonna pull myself up here for this. We got 17 people watching. That's not bad. I assume those are all your friends. My friends are all probably. Anyway, let me hold on. I'm gonna give you the last word here, Jeff. I just want to plug your logo one more time. Jade Nectar. It's Jeff Nordahl. I always give my guests the last word. So if we missed anything you think is important, or if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs that you want to do, now is the time. And thank you so much for being here. This was a banger, dude. I appreciate it.
It's awesome. And so I just want to say I appreciate you reaching out. I think we're all on sort of this truth seeking quest, and we're trying to do good in the world. And we just know that there's going to be some nefarious folks who, unfortunately, these corporations, they're in a mindset of they kind of want to steal all the toys on the playground and keep them for themselves. So we just have to be prepared. But I think at the same way, not necessarily, it's kind of our job as the cannabis movement is not to just demonize those people, but it would be nice to actually, in a way, convert or help try and enlighten, or just give them some different ideas of, hey, maybe with cannabis especially, we can do something different that just feels good, that doesn't exploit or oppress anyone in the supply chain. We can be respectful of all the different, of the retailers, the distributors, the farmers, the accountants, the attorneys, that we're all kind of on this movement together to just bring the cannabis love, the cannabis wellness to more people, because it can really be a benefit and a positive thing in people's lives. So if more people could be on that page, that we're part of a movement, not just an industry, but a movement, that would be good. And there may be some people who started out chasing crypto and fast money and had the Lambo quest, and maybe they'll have a change of heart, change of perspective, and actually embrace the concept of more of a communal movement industry. And that would be, at least for me, I think that would be cool. I'd be happy to work with anyone, and if bridges have been burned, I'm cool with doing some fence mending and rebuilding those bridges too. I don't hold a grudge. Just want to see things happy, warm and fuzzy. By
the way, I was in Highgate in '95 for the Dead show. It was wild. I hate to steal your last word, but I was up there. I was 12 years old.
Where's Highgate?
It's in northern Vermont.
Oh, so you saw Jerry then?
Right before he died. Yeah. I was too young to understand what was happening, but I was there.
You got the vibe. I know someone who was a fetus at a Dead show. So they're like, I kind of experienced Jerry in the womb. But and there's cool stuff. I just went to the Sphere in Vegas, and that was a hoot, and that was a party. But yeah, actually seeing Jerry too, that's a very special thing. That was an amazing thing. That's kind of once in a lifetime cool stuff. So anyway, I really appreciate you. I appreciate this opportunity, and I just dig your vibe. I'm not trying to be patronizing, but I appreciate your vibe. So
likewise, I'm going to sign it off. This is Jeff Nordahl. Here, I'll slap your logo up one more time just for shameless shits and giggles. Jeff Nordahl, Jade, Nectar. Stick around for 1 minute if you would. I'm going to do the outro. I'm your host, Caleb Teskey. And remember, the devil's in the details, and the details are in the fine print. Peace.